Hello, this is Hart Hagen. Let's talk about dead wood, the many wonders of dead wood. The idea is that think of the term dead wood. If somebody is like not very useful in any particular situation, or if there's something that needs to be cleared out, say how to the train. If there's something that needs to be cleared out, that is thought to be dead wood. Dead wood is something that it is just common in our language to say we need to get rid of dead wood. So it's easy for the public to fall for these notions promoted by the timber industry that, oh, we have to get in there and remove all of this dead wood. One of the many ways that the timber industry and government contractors and the like make money off of our forests is they convince people that you have to get in and remove the dead wood. One reason that it is thought that we need to remove the dead wood is that dead wood is useless. And another reason, by the same token, that it is thought that we need to remove dead wood is that it is not commonly understood what are all the benefits of the dead wood. So let's look at that and see. I'm going to share my handy dandy slide presentation with you. And I'm going to click on the right thing over here. So this is an article that I wrote a few months back. You can go to harthagen.substack.com. And November 10th, 2024 is when I wrote this article. Deadwood is here to say, I get no respect. No respect, I tell you. Deadwood gets no respect despite the many benefits of deadwood to the forest ecosystem. Climate scientists, so-called scientists, and the timber industry disregard the vital role of dead trees in a forest. So I invite you to go read that article. So what you're looking at here is a picture of a log that I took in Louisville Nature Center. It is it's a dead log, and you can also tell that it's wet. So it's wet. Why? It's wet because it's holding water. It doesn't just get wet right after a rain. It rains and then it stays wet. The reason is that it stays wet because it becomes increasingly porous over time. Think of how heavy a log is. Like, let's say you're trying to pick up a log from a tree that's just been cut, and it's heavy. The reason it's heavy is because it has a lot of water in it. But if that wood stays on the forest floor for a period of time, the water that was in there starts to evaporate from it, partly because you've got lots of organisms that are in there and they're making their living burrowing in there. Ants and insect larvae and bacteria and fungi are all making their living kind of decaying that dead wood. Just like, if you go, if an animal dies, it's like, what stinks? It's because it stinks because it's in the process of decomposition. It's in the decomposition because nature takes care of those dead things. And the main difference between the decay of wood and the decay of an animal is that an animal typically decays a whole lot faster. But the dead wood is also in the process of decay. It is living things that are causing the decay. It's not just sitting there. Things don't rot just on their own. They rot because they're being engaged and eaten by any number of living things, starting with bacteria and fungi, and also insect larvae like beetles and the like. So it says here, this log has been here several years. It is habitat for fungi, bacteria, beetles, and insect larvae, and it holds water. What can we say about the water in a log? Well, water holding capacity increases over time because over the course of time, it becomes more porous. It has empty spaces in it. It has a lot of empty spaces. So if you've ever held on to a piece of log that is both old and dry, it's very lightweight. But if it's wet, it's very heavy because of the water. But if it doesn't have any water in it, it's very lightweight because of all those empty spaces that are filled with air. This demonstrates how over the course of time, that wood becomes very porous and it's either filled with air or water. Number two, everything needs water. Because everything needs water, this log that holds a lot of water is a source of water for all sorts of living things. For example, if you see a butterfly, the butterfly doesn't want to go land on the water, because if the butterfly lands on the water, it's going to drown. It wants to light on something that's damp. Butterflies, bees, flies, insects, insects of all sorts, they thrive on the water that resides within dead logs. Item number three, this is not fuel for a fire. So the timber industry and the Forest Service want you to think that they have to get in there and remove all these logs, and they do that because they're playing on people's fear of wildfire. But in point of fact, this is not fuel for a fire. Why? Because it is wet. Things that are wet don't burn, with few exceptions, hardly any exceptions in nature. In nature, water is a surefire way to ensure that something does not burn. Number four, this is not waste, because it provides water for myriad living things. And also, it's not waste because it is food for all of the things. They're called primary decomposers, but this is food for all of the things that tend to break down this wood. And so please do not remove this log. Next slide. Here's another picture saying, you can see inside here that, this log has been there for a few years. And, I would estimate maybe 10 years, maybe 5 years. When they still have the bark on, then it depends on the species of tree. It depends on whether you're in a wet area or a dry area. In wet areas, things tend to decompose faster. But, this is a cherry tree. And I'm just estimating, based on what I've seen before, that this has been here, maybe 5 to 7 years. So this log shares its moisture with the surrounding plants and soil. If you have, let's click back here. You have plants around here. This log shares its moisture with the soil. The soil shares its moisture with the plants. So these plants are going to have more water to drink if they're allowed, if this log stays here. So here's another picture. Where did I take this? Maybe Louisville Nature Center, maybe in Jefferson Memorial Forest. But dead wood absorbs, number one, dead wood absorbs water, and it's enough to grow moss. Why is there moss on this log? Well, partly because this log has enough water in it for the moss to live on. Number two, moss is an indication of the presence of water. Number three, moss is food for something. A fully functioning ecosystem, you always have nutrients that are cycling. There are about 20 nutrients that are essential for plants, and they're essential. Those same nutrients are also essential for everything else in the food chain, animals and fungi, bacteria, insects, etc. So the moss is like that. Moss is food for something. The moss is going to grow, and it's going to live, and it's going to die, and in all parts of that life cycle, something is trying to eat the moss. And it has defenses for that, but especially when the moss dies, then it becomes food for something, and whatever it's made out of, those nutrients become available to the other things. It's made out of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, iron, zinc, magnesium, calcium, etc. I'm trying to name most of the essential nutrients, and we want those nutrients to cycle. They're only going to cycle in a functioning ecosystem, and there's only going to be a functioning ecosystem if we're not constantly poisoning the ecosystem and removing organic matter from the ecosystem. So here's another picture. Pretty sure I took this in Jefferson Memorial Forest near Louisville. There's many cavities, and you have some there's many cavities, some for nests and some for food. So these cavities were mostly made by woodpeckers. Woodpeckers excavate holes in dead trees, mainly for, I can think of 4 reasons, but they make nests, and they're foraging for food. A woodpecker will typically make 2 to 4 nests per year, but only use one of them. So something else gets to come in and use the nest that the woodpecker made but did not occupy. And then in subsequent years, other things like other birds, warblers for one, make their nests in these, So here, let's see if you can guess what woodpeckers we have here. Take a minute. Anybody know any of those woodpeckers? So this is a picture of a pileated woodpecker. On the right, on the bottom left is a flicker, and on the top left is a downy woodpecker. These are making their nests in dead wood. We don't need the timber industry and the Forest Service and all sorts of government contractors to come in and remove this dead wood, because this dead wood is vital for the life of the forest. Here's something from Conservation Northwest, Keeping the Northwest Wild. Standing dead trees, in other words, so we're talking about the many wonders of dead wood. And it says dead, quote unquote, dead trees are actually full of life. A woman named Ellen Wall, W-O-H-L, titled a book called Dead Wood, The Afterlife of Trees. So when a tree dies as an organism, it gives life to many other things. Reading the quote from Conservation Northwest. Standing dead trees, called snags, provide birds and mammals with shelter to raise young, and raptors with unobstructed vantage points. In other words, raptors are the predators, and the predators need prey. Raptors and other predators like to hunt in places where the prey is not covered up. They want to be able to see the prey, and that's one reason why standing dead trees in forests are, they exhibit a whole lot of biological diversity, because there's lots of food there for small mammals and birds, and there's the small mammals and the birds are prey for predators like raptors. Raptors includes hawks, eagles, and owls. So it says here, large downed trees also provide important habitat for wildlife. Hundreds of species of birds, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and fish benefit from snags for food, nesting, and shelter. So here's another picture of a pileated woodpecker. It's a cavity nester. It's a primary cavity nester, and other cavity nesters move in the next year and even the same year. The dead wood is soft. Why do woodpeckers prefer to make their nests in dead wood? And the reason is the dead wood is softer, and therefore it's easier to excavate. And the other reason is that dead wood has a greater abundance of insects and insect larvae. That's food for woodpeckers. This article is on a website called The Natural Web, Exploring Nature's Connections. I did a search for life in dead wood, and this came up. Then I'm going to be reading some quotes from the article. Mason wasps provision their nests with caterpillars on which their larvae feed as they develop. They usually nest in borings made in dead wood by other insects like beetles or bees. Now we're talking about all of the things. Let's I'm going to come back to this, but let's recap so far. So we're talking about why dead wood is not wasted. Dead wood is a source of life for the forest ecosystem. And how does that work? For one thing, when something dies, it becomes food for something. And when a tree dies, it becomes food for something. It becomes food for bacteria, fungi, probably some protozoa. It becomes food for insect larvae. It becomes food for beetles. There are certain caterpillars that feed on dead wood. So you have, the bacteria and the fungi start this whole food chain of their own. And then, of course, you can imagine how woodpeckers, for example, that eat insects, feed on the insects that make their living by living in dead wood and to some extent eating dead wood. Some of the insects, the insects are feeding, the small insects, the micro arthropods are feeding on the dead wood. They're shredding the dead wood. And then you see these little pill bugs and centipedes. They don't have a mouth. They're not eating something that's very big. They must be kind of skimming calories and nutrients off of the bacteria and the fungi and the protozoa, etc. So dead wood is a source of life in the forest because it is food, water, and shelter. Let's go on to the next slide. There are ant species that make their homes in rotting wood. Ants don't cause wood to rot, and they don't eat wood. They excavate spaces for their nests in wood that is already soft and moist. So what do ants eat? Well, many things, but I see ants eating things like, they're trying to go get larvae from other insects. They're eating, they eat pieces of fruit, etc. But they're making their nest in the dead wood. Not all ants, but many ants make their nests in dead wood. Ants and wood-boring beetle larvae are favorite foods of many woodpeckers. Titmice, white and red-breasted nuthatches, Carolina and house wrens, all nest in holes in dead or living trees, sometimes using abandoned woodpecker holes. All of these birds also forage for insect protein, a bounty of which is available in or on dead wood. So I think you get the idea. I'm going to see if there's anything else on this slideshow. The recap is dead wood soaks up rainfall and remains wet. It provides food and water for myriad decomposers like fungi, bacteria, and insects who consume the nutrients and put those nutrients into biologically available form for birds, mammals, etc. Dead wood is not waste. It is a vital part of forest life cycles. So what's the reason for all this? The reason for all this is to push back on bad policy and bad practices. Our government is a fountainhead of bad policies and bad practices. Unfortunately, the U.S. Forest Service, you would think that the Forest Service should be in the business of protecting our forests, but quite the opposite. The Forest Service is in the business of exploiting our forests and doing so at the behest of industry. And they sell our timber for a loss. They sell trees for cheap. They are responsible for paying all sorts of contractors that do not need to be in our forests. They need to, get another job, and we need to give them better jobs. We pay people, in essence, through our tax dollars and through bad policy and through natural disasters that are caused by deforestation. We pay for bad policies, and we need to stop doing that. This has been one small step in the direction of helping people be aware of, what's the difference between good forest policy and bad forest policy by, looking at how our forests really work. Thank you for joining me. Have a great day.